Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and this is my review of Door and Door 2 Tokyo Diary, two Japanese thriller horror hybrids from 1988 and 1991. Now, despite their age, I've never heard of either one of these films before. I'm also unfamiliar with the director, Banmai Takahashi, for the most part. But fortunately for fans of Japanese cinema, both films recently got a Blu-ray release. So let's talk about the first film, Door from 1988. I would classify this as a thriller horror hybrid. Now you have a housewife named Yasuko who lives in an urban high-rise apartment with her husband and son. Annoyed by spam calls and door-to-door salesmen, Yasuko slams the door on a salesman's finger when he tries to squeeze a flyer through the crevice. And he leaves, but the next day, her nightmare begins. So we get a basic introduction to this family near the beginning. The father's not around very much at home due to his work schedule, which leaves the wife and child alone together most of the time. And we also get a few scenes with the villain, actually, before they turn, so to speak. And he seems like a normal door-to-door salesman. Really. Maybe a little bit pushy, but, you gotta kind of be that way, right? Until our protagonist slams his finger in her door. And she does it kind of accidentally, but still, it pisses the dude off. So it makes you think, if she nicely declined his sales pitch, he probably would have simply walked away and perhaps would have never been a problem. So it's one of those situations where one thing happens and then, the conflict just escalates out of control. It is a pretty slow burn thriller, which uses anxiety rather than, terror. And the villain intimidates the protagonist in a number of ways, but does not immediately act in the form of an attack. And the confrontations are, I guess, commonplace. When things escalate, they take place mostly inside of her apartment, but they are pretty effective. You have a woman who is attempting to escape her home with her child, while a psycho is present, intimidating her and almost like playing husband for a little while in the house, and not allowing them to leave. And you're not sure how far he's willing to go in this act of revenge, so to speak. Is he going to kill her? Does he want an apology or perhaps some form of penance? That sense of uncertainty is what really kind of drives the second half of the film. Now, in terms of script writing, it's pretty tight, pretty convincing. There are some questionable decision-making moments by the protagonist during the final act, but that's common in thrillers and with situations such as this. Not a huge distraction, but those elements do exist here. There are a few bits of bloody violence, but nothing crazy. Now, there's one scene near the end that has some good overhead camera work that moves from room to room as it follows the characters, as the guy's chasing her throughout her house. And that was a highlight shot. The camera work is still good overall, but that was a highlight. And they mix in some moving shots, some shots from floor level, etc. This is a lower budget production, since it had a small theatrical release, I believe, but it was primarily made for the home video market when it came out. But still, it has just enough style to be visually interesting. Music's good, lighting's good, but it's pretty naturalistic in its presentation. So I enjoyed Door. Is it a lost classic? Probably not, due to its conventional premise, but it's certainly worth a watch if you're a fan of Japanese thrillers or horror movies. So I do recommend this. Now let's talk about the sequel here, which is quite a different film, actually. That is Door 2, Tokyo Diary from 1991. This is an exploitation thriller drama. That's how I would classify this. So the following plot synopsis was taken from the website Windows on Worlds. A menacing voice message reminds Chikako Aoyama plays her, that her work is dangerous. A woman telling her to back off, but for unclear reasons. Ironically enough, Ai is a call girl who runs her own operation through a soon-to-be obsolete technology of a telephone answering service. She explains that she chooses the men for herself, until finally deciding which door to open, so to speak, though it seems unclear how far she's she is aware of her own vulnerability in these situations. And, something eventually goes wrong. Now, the most obvious observation of Door 2 is that, unlike its predecessor, it has more nudity and sex, which makes it feel more like an exploitation flick instead of a traditional thriller. The movie begins with our protagonist going from client to client, and that's basically what happens throughout the film. Of course, each client has like a different interaction with her, and you're wondering which one could turn out to be the genuine threat. So again, you have a sense of uncertainty that's like driving the film. Now, these threats are not known for a little while, since our protagonist meets a number of these clients, some of whom are weirdos and others less so. Now, in some ways, it's nice that they made a different kind of film for the sequel, because you're thinking, oh, Door 2 is going to be about another woman, or even worse, the same woman, who, angers another guy who tries to break into her house, right? But they go a whole different route. You have a different protagonist and a whole different plot. So this is probably less story-driven, more action-driven. And it actually feels more like a drama than a thriller at times. I could see some viewers getting a little impatient with this one, but I found it to be watchable. It does have some moments that you will remember, I think. The ending is like a crazy speech at a wedding, of all places, which is like totally unexpected. When you hear the speech at the end of the movie, I just started laughing because it was kind of absurd. Now, like its predecessor, there are a few bits of bloody violence, but nothing crazy. Some nice style and lighting as well, and the lead actress is good. The acting in these movies is actually pretty good, given the limited budgets. So I would say that like Door 2 is a little bit weaker than the first film in the franchise, if only because it meanders a little bit more, It's not like as streamlined in terms of plotting and conflict. But I do think it's worth a watch. It's a pretty well-made film, actually. And if you like more of the nudie aspects of the Japanese film industry, like the exploitation style stuff, check it out. Now, I've seen very little from this director. He directed Zen from 2009, which was pretty good. But after checking his resume, he made a lot of Pinku films in his earlier years. And that filmmaking style comes through in Door 2, but less so, basically not at all, in Door 1. So that's another nice thing about this double feature, is you get exposure to two different subgenres of Japanese cinema, from the late 80s, early 90s. So I would say that, neither one of these films is a lost classic or anything, but if you're interested in these kinds of movies from Japan during this era, they're worth a watch. And they were recently released on Blu-ray from Third Window Films. And as always, folks, I'll see you next time.